Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I think I didn't do anything wrong. I just had a little fun with my ex in front of my husband. Honestly, Graham's always so dramatic about everything. But when I came home the next morning and my key card wouldn't work, I found a thick envelope taped to the door, divorce papers, and a letter stating I had 24 hours to collect my things. How did a harmless evening spiral into this nightmare? The downtown bistro hummed with Friday night energy as our group gathered around the large corner table. Graham sat beside me, methodically cutting his steak while I sipped my third glass of wine. Across from us, his mother Janice maintained her usual stern expression, while his sister Cleo tried to keep the conversation light. My parents, Valerie and Joel, flanked 7-year-old Maisie, who was picking at her chicken fingers with unusual quiet. Then Ethan walked in. My old university boyfriend had grown more handsome over the years, his designer stubble and confident stride turning heads as he approached our table. He was here on business, some freelance project with my marketing firm, but seeing him again after months sent a familiar thrill through me. Isolde! Ethan's voice carried that same charming warmth I remembered. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder. I stood to hug him, letting the embrace linger just a moment too long. You made it. Everyone, this is Ethan. We go way back to university days. Graham's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as Ethan took the empty chair directly across from me. I felt a surge of excitement at the possibility of shaking up our predictably boring family dinner. So, Ethan, I said, leaning forward with a bright smile, tell everyone about that crazy project we're working on together. We've been staying so late at the office. Ethan grinned, playing along. Isolde's been incredible. We make quite the team, just like old times. I laughed, tossing my hair back. Remember that all-nighter we pulled in the design lab? We were so exhausted we could barely think straight. How could I forget? Ethan's eyes sparkled with mischief. You always were my favorite study partner. The table fell uncomfortably silent. Graham set down his fork with deliberate precision, while Janice's disapproving stare could have frozen wine. Little Maisie looked between her father and me with growing confusion. Mom, Maisie whispered, tugging at my sleeve. Why is Daddy looking sad? Daddy's not sad, sweetheart, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. He's just being his usual serious self. Some people can't handle when others have fun. Graham's knuckles whitened as he gripped his napkin. Isolde! Oh, come on, Graham, I interrupted with an exaggerated eye roll. Ethan and I are just reminiscing. Don't be so paranoid. Cleo shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should order dessert. Maisie, would you like some ice cream? But I was enjoying myself too much to stop. The wine had loosened my tongue, and something about Graham's obvious discomfort only spurred me on. Ethan, remember that weekend trip to Brighton? The one where we... That's enough. Graham's voice was quiet, but carried an edge I'd rarely heard before. I turned to him with mock innocence. What's wrong, darling? You're not jealous of ancient history, are you? My mother Valerie jumped in with her typical enabling. Oh, let Isolde have her fun, Graham. There's nothing wrong with old friends catching up. Janice's lips pursed into a thin line. Some conversations are better had in private. Exactly, I said triumphantly. See, Graham? Even your mother thinks you're overreacting. That's not what Janice began, but I was already turning back to Ethan. So, anyway, about that Brighton trip. I launched into an animated story about our weekend getaway, embellishing details and sharing intimate looks with Ethan across the table. He seemed amused by the drama he was causing, occasionally adding flirtatious comments that made me giggle like a schoolgirl. Graham sat in stony silence, his meal growing cold. Maisie had stopped eating entirely, her small hands fidgeting with her napkin as she watched the tension build around her. "You know what?" Graham suddenly stood, pulling out his wallet. "I'm not feeling well. I think I'll head home early." "Oh, don't be such a baby," I said with a dismissive wave. "Stay and have some fun for once." He placed several bills on the table without looking at me. "Cleo, could you make sure Maisie gets home safely? I'll take a cab." "Graham, wait." Cleo started to rise, but he was already walking away. I watched him go with a mixture of satisfaction and irritation. Well, that was dramatic. He's always been so insecure about my past relationships. The table remained uncomfortably quiet. Maisie's eyes had filled with tears. "Why did Daddy leave?" she asked in a small voice. "Because Daddy doesn't know how to have fun," I said, signaling the waiter for another wine. "Don't worry about it, sweetheart." Ethan cleared his throat. "Maybe I should go too. Early morning tomorrow." "Oh, stay," I protested. "The night is young. We could go somewhere else, just like old times." And we did. After Cleo took Maisie home and my parents made their polite excuses, Ethan and I bar-hopped until the early morning hours. It felt wonderful to be spontaneous again, to laugh and flirt without Graham's disapproving presence dampening the mood. I ended up crashing at what I told everyone was a friend's place, sending a quick text to Graham around 2 a.m. "Staying at Sarah's tonight. Don't wait up." The next morning, nursing a mild hangover, I returned to our upscale apartment complex with a slight spring in my step. Last night had been exactly what I needed, a reminder that I was still attractive, still fun, still capable of turning heads. But when I pressed my keycard to the reader, nothing happened. The light stayed red, and the door remained firmly locked. I tried again, thinking it might be a technical glitch. Still nothing. That's when I noticed the thick manila envelope taped to our door, my name written across it in Graham's precise handwriting. With trembling fingers, I tore it open. Inside were divorce papers, already filed, and a letter in Graham's measured script. "Isolde, you have 24 hours to collect your personal belongings. I've changed the locks and notified building security. Contact my attorney for any questions. Graham." My legs went weak. This couldn't be happening. It was just one night of harmless fun. How had it escalated to this? I stood in the hallway, staring at the papers in disbelief. This had to be some kind of joke, one of Graham's passive-aggressive attempts to scare me into apologizing. He'd done similar things before, giving me the silent treatment, sleeping in the guest room, but he always came around eventually. I pulled out my phone and called him, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I tried texting. "Graham, this is ridiculous. Open the door so we can talk like adults." No response. Panic starting to creep in, I approached the building's security desk. The guard, someone I'd seen countless times over the past 3 years, looked up with an uncomfortable expression. "Mrs. Marin, I'm sorry, but I can't let you up. Your access has been revoked by the primary leaseholder." "That's impossible," I said, my voice rising. "I live here. This is my home." "I understand your frustration, ma'am, but I have to follow the updated authorization. You'll need to contact the leaseholder directly." The leaseholder. Of course, the apartment was in Graham's name. He'd handled all the paperwork when we moved in, something about his credit score being better. At the time, I'd been grateful not to deal with the bureaucracy. Now, I was locked out of my own life. I tried calling Graham again, then Cleo, then even stern Janice. Nothing. It was as if the entire Marin family had coordinated their radio silence. With nowhere else to go, I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs, the divorce papers crumpled in my passenger seat. "Isolde!" My mother Valerie opened the door in her bathrobe, immediately pulling me into a hug. "What's wrong, sweetheart? You look terrible." "Graham's lost his mind," I said, collapsing onto their familiar couch. "He's locked me out of our apartment and filed for divorce, all because I had dinner with an old friend." Valerie's face hardened with indignation. "He did what? Over dinner? That man has always been too controlling." My father Joel appeared in the doorway, newspaper in hand, looking distinctly uncomfortable with the drama unfolding in his living room. "What happened exactly?" he asked quietly. I launched into my version of events, carefully editing out the more flirtatious details. "Ethan's working with my company, so he joined us for dinner. We were just catching up, talking about old times, and Graham got jealous and stormed out. Apparently, that justifies destroying our marriage." "That's ridiculous," Valerie said, settling beside me with a cup of tea. "You're allowed to have friends. Graham's always been too possessive. Remember how he used to check your phone?" "Exactly." I felt validated by her support. "He's always been paranoid about my past relationships. This is just him taking it to an extreme." Joel frowned. "But divorce papers, Isolde? That seems like a pretty drastic response to one dinner." "That's what I'm saying. He's completely overreacting." I pulled out my phone, opening our family group chat. "I need to set the record straight before he poisons everyone against me." I typed quickly. "Hi, everyone. I know last night ended awkwardly, but I want to clarify what actually happened. Graham became irrationally jealous because I was having a normal conversation with a work colleague. Now he's locked me out of our home and filed for divorce. I'm devastated that he would choose to punish our family over his own insecurities. Please keep Maisie in your thoughts during this difficult time." The response was swift and telling. Valerie immediately replied with heart emojis and supportive messages. Cleo sent a cautious, "Let's all take a breath and work this out." But Janice's response was ice cold. "Some actions have consequences, Isolde." Then I noticed I couldn't see Graham's status in the chat anymore. He'd blocked me. "Can you believe this?" I showed my mother the phone. "He's turning his whole family against me." "Don't worry, sweetheart," Valerie said, rubbing my back. "He'll come to his senses. Men always do when they realize what they're about to lose." But as the day wore on, my confidence began to waver. A formal email arrived from Graham's attorney, someone I'd never heard of, which meant he'd been planning this longer than I'd realized. The message was clinical and devastating. "Mrs. Marin, please be advised that separation proceedings have been initiated. We have scheduled mediation sessions for next week. Additionally, you are hereby notified not to remove your daughter from school grounds or attempt to take her out of state without written consent from both parents and the court. Any violation will result in immediate legal action." "They can't do this," I told my parents over dinner. "Maisie is my daughter too. I have rights." Joel set down his fork carefully. "Isolde, maybe you should get your own lawyer. This sounds serious." "Serious?" I laughed bitterly. "It's Graham being his usual dramatic self. He's probably hoping to scare me into groveling, but I won't give him the satisfaction." But privately, a cold fear was settling in my stomach. The legal language, the formal procedures, the coordinated silence from his family. This felt different from Graham's previous sulking episodes. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I stared at the ceiling and tried to figure out where everything had gone wrong. All I'd done was have a little fun, show some personality for once, instead of being the perfect corporate wife Graham seemed to expect. It wasn't my fault he was too insecure to handle it. Monday morning at the office felt surreal. I sat at my desk, trying to focus on quarterly reports while my personal life imploded around me. Every few minutes, I'd check my phone for messages from Graham that never came. "Rough weekend?" My colleague Marcus appeared at my cubicle with coffee and a concerned expression. I seized the opportunity to share my side of the story. "My husband's having some kind of breakdown. He filed for divorce because I had dinner with a friend. Can you believe that?" Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? Just for having dinner? I know, right? Graham's always been jealous, but this is next-level crazy." I leaned closer, lowering my voice conspiratorially. "He's always been emotionally controlling. I should have seen this coming." Word spread quickly through our open-plan office. By lunch, I had a small audience of sympathetic coworkers listening to my tale of marital persecution. "He sounds toxic," said Jennifer from accounting. "My ex was the same way. Couldn't handle me having male friends." "That's exactly it," I agreed. "And now he's using our daughter as a weapon, trying to restrict my access to her. It's emotional abuse, really." I carefully crafted my narrative throughout the day, painting Graham as a controlling husband who'd finally revealed his true colors. I mentioned his paranoid behavior, his manipulation tactics, and his pattern of isolation. Each telling made me feel more justified, more like the victim I truly was. But when I tried to find Ethan to get his support for my version of events, he was nowhere to be found. "He's working from home this week," his project manager told me. "Some kind of family emergency." I texted him, "Hey, crazy weekend. Graham's filing for divorce over our dinner. Can you believe it? Would love to talk." Hours passed with no response. By Tuesday, I noticed subtle changes in the office atmosphere. Conversations quieted when I approached, and my usual lunch group seemed to have plans that didn't include me. When I complained to HR about the hostile work environment, the representative gave me a strange look. "Actually, Isolde, we need to discuss some discrepancies in your recent timesheets. Can you walk me through your hours last Thursday and Friday?" My blood ran cold. "What kind of discrepancies?" "You logged overtime both days, but your keycard shows you left the building at 5:30 p.m. Thursday and 4:45 p.m. Friday. We also have contractor logs showing Ethan Caro worked late both those evenings." I scrambled for an explanation. "I was working on the Morrison account from home. You can check my laptop logs." "We did. No activity after 6 p.m. either day." The meeting ended with a formal warning about timesheet fraud and a note in my personnel file. As I walked back to my desk, I realized Graham's reach was longer than I'd thought. He worked in IT. He'd know exactly how to trace digital footprints. That evening at my parents' house, I vented my frustrations to anyone who would listen. "They're all turning against me," I told Valerie as we sat in the kitchen. "Graham's poisoning everyone. My co-workers, his family, probably Maisie's teachers too." "What about your friends?" Valerie asked. "Surely they can see what's really happening." I pulled out my phone to check social media, hoping for supportive comments on the vague posts I'd made about going through a difficult time. Instead, I found something that made my stomach drop. Cleo had posted a photo from the weekend, Graham and Maisie at the park, both smiling genuinely for the first time in months. The caption read, "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is protect the people you love. Family. Courage. New beginnings." The comments were full of support for Graham. Even people I considered friends were liking the post and leaving encouraging messages. "Look at this," I showed my mother the phone. "They're making him look like the victim. He's manipulating everyone." Valerie frowned at the screen. "Maybe you should try reaching out to Maisie. She needs her mother right now." I tried calling the apartment, but the number went straight to a message saying it had been disconnected. When I called Maisie's school to arrange pickup, they informed me that Graham had updated the authorized contact list, and I would need written permission from him to make any changes to her schedule. "This is kidnapping," I shouted at the school secretary. "She's my daughter." "Ma'am, we have to follow the custody arrangements on file. If you have concerns, you'll need to address them through the proper legal channels." That night, I lay awake crafting messages to send to mutual friends, explaining my side of the story and warning them about Graham's manipulative behavior. I detailed his history of jealousy, his controlling tendencies, and his use of our daughter as a pawn. But when I woke up Wednesday morning, I found an email that shattered my remaining confidence. "Mrs. Marin, this is to inform you that our office has been contacted by your employer regarding documentation of your work hours and contractor logs for Ethan Caro. We have advised them to preserve all records as they may be relevant to upcoming proceedings. Additionally, We request that you refrain from discussing your case on social media or with mutual acquaintances, as such communications may be used as evidence. Graham Marin's legal counsel. They were building a case against me, collecting evidence I didn't even know existed. Every lie I'd told, every exaggeration I'd made, every manipulation I'd attempted, it was all being documented and catalogued. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wondered if I was in real trouble. The family law office smelled like leather and disappointment. I sat across from Graham's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Chen, while my hastily hired lawyer shuffled through papers beside me. "Let's review the timeline," Rebecca said, spreading documents across the conference table like evidence at a crime scene. Friday, October 13th, Mrs. Marin logged overtime hours but left work at 4:45 p.m. Mr. Caro's contractor logs show he remained in the building until 11:30 p.m. I shifted uncomfortably. I finished my work early and decided to go home. Yet you charged the company for overtime hours you didn't work. Rebecca's tone remained neutral, but the implication was clear. That same evening, phone records show 17 text messages between you and Mr. Caro between 5 p.m. and 1:47 a.m. My lawyer, a nervous man named David Hoffman, whom I'd found through a Google search, cleared his throat. "My client's work arrangements and personal communications are hardly grounds for—" "We're not finished." Rebecca produced another stack of papers. Restaurant receipts from Bistro Laurent show Mrs. Marin and Mr. Caro's signatures on a bill time-stamped 12:43 a.m. The establishment's security cameras confirm they were alone together. My mouth went dry. We were just talking, old friends catching up. Until 2:30 a.m., according to the parking garage cameras at Mr. Caro's apartment building. Rebecca's expression remained professionally blank. Mrs. Marin's vehicle is clearly visible in the footage. The room felt like it was closing in around me. "You're stalking me now? This is harassment." Mr. Marin hired a private investigator after receiving concerning reports about his wife's behavior, Rebecca continued calmly. The investigator documented Mrs. Marin entering Mr. Caro's building at 12:47 a.m. and leaving at 6:15 a.m. "I fell asleep on his couch." The words came out louder than I intended. "Nothing happened." Rebecca slid a photograph across the table. It showed me leaving Ethan's building in the same clothes I'd worn to dinner, my hair disheveled, carrying my shoes in my hand. "This was taken at 6:15 a.m., she said. The same morning, Mrs. Marin discovered her apartment access had been revoked. My lawyer was scribbling notes furiously, but I could see the defeat in his posture. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked. "Mr. Marin is seeking primary custody of their daughter, citing Mrs. Marin's adultery, financial fraud at her workplace, and what he believes to be a pattern of manipulative behavior harmful to the child." "That's ridiculous." I slammed my hand on the table. "Graham's the one being manipulative. He's orchestrating this whole thing to punish me for having friends." Rebecca opened another folder. "These are screenshots from Mrs. Marin's social media posts and text messages over the past week. In them, she accuses Mr. Marin of emotional abuse, claims he's kidnapping their daughter, and describes him as mentally unstable to friends, family, and co-workers. She spread the screenshots out like a fan. Every angry text, every vindictive post, every manipulative message I'd sent was there in black and white. Mr. Marin has never responded to these accusations publicly or privately. He's focused solely on protecting his daughter's well-being during this difficult transition." "Where is Graham?" I demanded. "Why isn't he here? Too cowardly to face me directly?" "Mr. Marin is at his daughter's school," Rebecca replied. "Maisie's teacher requested a meeting about her declining academic performance and increased anxiety. She's been having nightmares and crying in class." The words hit me like a physical blow. Maisie's upset because Graham won't let her see me. "According to the school counselor's report," Rebecca continued, producing yet another document. Maisie has expressed fear about making Mommy and Daddy fight. She's been drawing pictures of herself hiding while her parents argue. She slid a child's drawing across the table. It showed a stick figure girl crouched under a table while two larger figures faced off with angry scribbles for faces. The word scared was written in crayon at the bottom. My heart clenched. She's just confused. Kids always struggle with change. The school counselor noted that Maisie's distress began before the separation, Rebecca said. She's been displaying anxiety symptoms for several months, coinciding with what Mr. Marin describes as an escalation in marital conflict. I thought back to all the times I'd argued with Graham in front of Maisie, all the nights I'd come home late and found her waiting up, all the mornings she'd asked why Daddy looked sad. "Mrs. Marin," my lawyer whispered, "perhaps we should consider a settlement that focuses on co-parenting arrangements." "No," I cut him off. "I won't let Graham steamroll me just because he's good at collecting evidence. This is my daughter we're talking about." Rebecca gathered her papers with practiced efficiency. "We'll be filing for temporary custody arrangements tomorrow morning. Mrs. Marin will have supervised visitation rights pending a full custody evaluation." Supervised? The word felt like a slap. You can't be serious. Given the documented pattern of manipulation and the child's current emotional state, the court will likely approve the request. Rebecca stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "I suggest you focus on demonstrating stability rather than continuing your public campaign against Mr. Marin." As we left the office, I felt the walls of my carefully constructed narrative crumbling around me. Every lie I'd told, every manipulation I'd attempted, every victim story I'd crafted, it was all being systematically dismantled by cold, hard evidence. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. Graham might be good at playing the long game, but he'd underestimated my determination to fight for what was mine. The mediation office felt like a courtroom, complete with harsh fluorescent lighting and the smell of institutional coffee. I sat beside my lawyer, watching Graham enter with Rebecca Chen and a briefcase that seemed ominously thick. This was my last chance to salvage something from the wreckage of my marriage. I'd spent the weekend crafting a new strategy, one that acknowledged some mistakes while repositioning me as a wife driven to desperation by years of emotional neglect. "Before we begin," I said as soon as everyone was seated, "I want to apologize for how things escalated. I know my behavior hasn't been perfect, but I think if we look at the bigger picture—" "Mrs. Marin," the mediator interrupted gently, "let's start with Mr. Marin's presentation, then you'll have your turn." Rebecca opened her briefcase with surgical precision. "We've prepared a comprehensive timeline of events leading to the marriage's breakdown." She produced a bound document that looked like a legal brief. "This begins 18 months ago, when Mrs. Marin first resumed contact with Mr. Caro through her workplace. The first exhibit was a screenshot of my LinkedIn message to Ethan. 'OMG, is this really you? We should definitely catch up soon.' I felt heat rise in my cheeks. 'That's just friendly networking.' 'Please hold your comments until your turn,' the mediator said. Rebecca continued methodically through months of evidence. Text messages where I'd complained about Graham being boring and suffocating, expense reports showing unexplained charges at restaurants and bars, photos from company events where Ethan and I stood closer than necessary. "The pattern escalates significantly in September," Rebecca said, flipping to a new section. "Mrs. Marin began regularly working late on projects that required minimal collaboration, yet consistently during hours when Mr. Caro was also in the building. She showed security footage, timestamps, keycard logs, and contractor schedules that painted a damning picture of coordination. On October 3rd, Mrs. Marin told her husband she was attending a mandatory training seminar. Rebecca produced a hotel receipt. This shows she and Mr. Caro checked into rooms on the same floor of the downtown Marriott. My lawyer shifted uncomfortably beside me. We hadn't discussed this evidence in our preparation. The seminar excuse was fabricated, Rebecca continued. Mrs. Marin's company confirms no such training occurred. The timeline continued through October, showing a clear pattern of deception. Late-night texts, suspicious expenses, and increasingly bold lies about my whereabouts. This brings us to the evening of October 13th, Rebecca said, when Mrs. Marin chose to publicly humiliate her husband and traumatize her daughter at a family dinner. She played audio from that night. Someone had recorded parts of our conversation at the bistro. Hearing my own voice flirting shamelessly with Ethan while my daughter sat nearby made me physically ill. Following this public display, Mrs. Marin spent the night at Mr. Caro's apartment, then initiated a campaign to portray herself as the victim of her husband's jealousy and control. The screenshots of my social media posts and text messages looked even worse in this context. Every manipulation attempt, every lie, every effort to paint Graham as the villain, it was all there. Most concerning, Rebecca said, are Mrs. Marin's attempts to weaponize their daughter's distress. She's repeatedly claimed that Maisie's tears are evidence of Mr. Marin's harmful behavior, when in fact the child's anxiety stems from witnessing her mother's deception and the resulting family conflict. She produced Maisie's school counselor report, which detailed months of concerning behaviors that predated the separation. Finally, Rebecca said, we have Mr. Caro's statement. My heart stopped. Ethan gave a statement? Mr. Caro contacted our office after Mrs. Marin began involving him in her public narrative about the divorce. He was concerned about potential professional repercussions and wanted to clarify his position. Rebecca read from a typed document. Mrs. Marin initiated and pursued our relationship despite my initial reluctance. She repeatedly described her marriage as dead and claimed she was planning to leave her husband regardless of our involvement. When she began portraying our affair as innocent friendship, I felt compelled to provide accurate information to prevent further deception. The room spun around me. Ethan had thrown me under the bus to protect his own reputation. That's not true, I burst out. He was just as involved as I was. He pursued me. The mediator made a note. Mrs. Marin, you'll have your opportunity to respond. But what could I say? The evidence was overwhelming, the timeline irrefutable. Every defense I'd prepared crumbled under the weight of documented facts. When my turn finally came, I tried one last desperate gambit. Yes, I made mistakes, I said, forcing tears into my voice. But you have to understand what drove me to this point. Graham has been emotionally distant for years. He never showed me affection, never made me feel valued. I was lonely and vulnerable, and Ethan took advantage of that. I looked directly at the mediator. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm still Maisie's mother. She needs me, especially now. Graham is trying to punish me by taking away the most important thing in my life. The mediator nodded politely, but I could see skepticism in her eyes. Mrs. Marin, can you explain why you've publicly accused Mr. Marin of emotional abuse and manipulation when the evidence suggests you've been the primary source of deception in the marriage? I fumbled for an answer. I was hurt and angry. People say things they don't mean when they're in pain. Yet you've continued these accusations for weeks, including attempts to turn family members and friends against your husband. I just wanted people to understand my side of the story. By fabricating a version of events that contradicts documented evidence? I had no response. The truth was laid bare in black and white, and no amount of spin could change it. The mediator closed her folder. I'll have a decision by tomorrow morning. Both parties should prepare for the likely outcome based on today's presentations. As we filed out of the office, I caught Graham's eye for the first time in weeks. I expected to see anger or vindictiveness, but instead found something worse: complete indifference. Graham, please, I called out in the hallway. We can work this out. Think about Maisie. He paused, his expression unreadable. I am thinking about Maisie. That's all I've been thinking about. Then he walked away, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my own making. The waiting room buzzed with whispers and rustling papers, but I barely heard any of it. My parents sat beside me in silence, their earlier certainty replaced by a quiet resignation that told me they knew what was coming. My mother tried to sound comforting, "We'll figure it out," but even her voice wavered. My father said nothing at all. Inside the courtroom, it was clinical. Clean lines, cold air, no room for sympathy. Graham sat across from me, calm, collected, the picture of composure I'd once mistaken for indifference. His lawyer, Rebecca Chen, presented the evidence like a surgeon exposing rot beneath polished skin. Texts, financial records, social media posts. Every word, every photo, every lie laid bare. The judge didn't need long. The documentation presents a pattern of adultery, deception, and emotional manipulation, she said. Most troubling are Mrs. Marin's attempts to distort public perception and alienate the plaintiff from family and friends. When she turned to the matter of custody, my world collapsed. Primary custody of the minor child, Maisie Marin, is awarded to Mr. Marin. Mrs. Marin will have supervised visitation every other weekend, pending completion of counseling and parenting classes. Supervised visitation. Like I was a threat to the child I'd given birth to. I stood, trembling, trying to salvage something. I love my daughter. I can change. But the judge only shook her head. Love is not the issue, Mrs. Marin. Judgment is. When it ended, Graham finally looked at me. Not with anger, but with the calm finality of a man who'd finished grieving. "I am thinking about Maisie," he said, when I accused him of destroying our family. "That's why I'm doing this." Outside, his family surrounded him like a shield. Maisie stood holding her aunt's hand, hesitant when she saw me. "Mommy, are you still mad at Daddy?" she asked softly. "I don't like it when people are angry." Her words gutted me. She turned back to Graham, wrapping her arms around his neck as he carried her away. Watching them leave was like watching my old life disappear in real time. Home, trust, motherhood, all shrinking into traffic until there was nothing left but the echo of my own mistakes. On the courthouse steps, I finally stopped pretending. There was no villain but me, no injustice, no misunderstanding, just choices made out of selfishness and pride, choices that had cost me everything. The keycard in my purse, useless now, just plastic, was the perfect metaphor. I'd locked myself out of the life I'd once built, and there was no code, no apology, no plea that could get me back in. Some doors, once closed, never open again. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.